All right, I'm just going to start. But basically, we're going to talk about Omicron, canceling events, maybe
Yeah.
maybe what happened. Okay, who got Omicron, something like that.
Yeah.
Talking about sober January. Does anybody do it? Did anybody has done it? Non-alcohol wines. Would somebody go there? And then how to drink wine. How do we do it? Welcome back to the Wine Tech Insiders podcast, year 2022. Happy New Year's, everybody. The insiders are back. We are going to talk about Omicron. Is this going to shut down events? Who knows what's going to happen, but it's another year of COVID starting off quite hot and quite influential in the wine world. A sober January. What people do in January. Do they drink? Do they take a month off? What does the wine world do? Where do you go with that? And a very interesting survey on how we should all drink wines. Well, I'd like to welcome our Wine Tech Insiders podcast members, our insiders, Jonathan from Bottlebooks, Nick from Wine Owners, and Laurie from Oushinery. Great. So
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
So maybe I'll start off with, it seems like everybody and their extended family got COVID, lived with somebody with COVID, knows 10 people who got COVID. How did you all fare over the holidays? Anybody get COVID?
I got COVID.
Yeah, I didn't.
Nick,
what happened?
I got COVID on the 19th, and I socially distanced, felt better on the 25th, cooked Christmas lunch, gave it to everyone else. So we had a quiet time, like the rest of the world, to be fair. So we knew so many people who were infected, and thank goodness, as it becomes more transmissible, it almost certainly does appear to be becoming an awful lot less strong, or at least in the case of those people who've been jabbed up. We understand that those who do end up in hospital tend to be those who are unjabbed. So yeah, honestly, a mild form of flu is how it felt.
And did it mess with your plans? Did you have to change things? Did you have to cancel events?
We did. We had to take the crown off the turkey and stick the legs in the freezer, and we had to cancel going visit family. But you know what? It was actually quite nice.
So there have been in the UK particularly, there were some events powered by Bottlebooks. Some of them, the first to cancel was Chile. It was very early. It was supposed to be this week. Jonathan, what's going on with events? What's the mood out there for trade events? Are they all going to be canceled in the winter and spring?
Yeah, I think it's a mixture of, there was some optimism of getting to do the physical events again already. I think there's still some optimism that Omicron will pass quickly, or else the events wouldn't have been just shifted by 3 months or 4 months. So I think a lot of people are optimistic or hoping that the wave will pass. It's, I think, still to be seen how it impacts the biggest of the events coming up, with Wine Paris in February, and then ProWein, of course, in March. Because the biggest challenge that it seems now is that if you fly in, are you allowed to fly home? Because it's almost guaranteed that any of these events are going to be super spreader events. It's almost unavoidable. So it's more of a commercial risk, and also a risk of traveling to one of these cities and then not being able to get back to your family for 2 weeks. So are people going to take that step? What's the risk? And then on the other side, we also have customers from last year that did successful digital, sometimes hybrid strategies, and they saw the benefit of doing something digitally that they were able to do not just on one day, but actually promote their wineries over 2, 3, or even up to 6 months, and getting them a lot of visibility in the process. So I think it's this year is going to be a topsy-turvy year, but at least if you do get sick this year, it seems like at the moment it's going to be a lot more milder than it was last year.
And I'm also curious, with big event like ProWein, like, I've been there. It is technically like massive, right? Like we're talking like massive space and everything. If they let's say they go, but like what would be the atmosphere? Like how would be, like if you get people to come, but maybe only a fraction come? Like I'm just also like curious about like, okay, so the event is happening. Some people like took the gamble or the risk, and I'm just curious, like, is it still possibly like to the detriment of the experience, or like I don't have the answer, but I'm also like, what happens when like, because the attendance, no matter what, will never be the same than it was 3 years ago, right? Like that doesn't seem possible.
Yeah. Well, I think it adds overhead to planning everything. So the people that we've talked to that are involved in planning the meetings and getting people to the stands, like the associations engage with, that's the most difficult thing for them at the moment, is that they're basically in a holding pattern. They know they need to arrange things early to get the people there, but they're uncertain whether there's going to be an event to get to people too. And then, so I think what's really difficult is it's a holding pattern. And at least to the event's credit at the moment, they're saying, okay, we're holding firm on the date, but you only hold firm on the date until you cancel. So it's, I think but yeah, I think that's, it's the holding pattern that everybody are in, whether or not you want to be. That's the challenge. Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess, this week has been, traditionally the big Burgundy tasting week in London, with, numerous concurrent events of Burgundy specialists taking place Monday through Thursday, i.e. tonight. And many of those were cancelled. I think many of the merchants, retailers decided that they weren't going to take the risk, but there were some that did do them, and they've been very well attended. And notwithstanding, they're trying to funnel people through time slots rather than sort of leave it open as to when people turn up. But some are happening. Not with the producers, inevitably, to your point, Jonathan, in terms of being able to come and then go home again. Touch wood, that augurs hopefully something positive for later on in this year. And certainly I'm very hopeful that by the spring, things may have changed. Do you think? I mean, I'm meant to be a speaker at Future Wine Expo in San Francisco on May the 17th. So I'm rolling the dice on that one.
Well, I'll be traveling to the US by then as well. So it's, yeah. So I'm optimistic that it's going to pass. I think the London Wine Fair is probably this time one of the events in the best situation, because but this is all assuming, that there's not another variant that comes through. So, I mean, we've all been in this position of optimism before. Mm-hmm. And then something else comes up just as you think you've gotten this one taken care of. So I think I think it's cautious optimism, maybe the right term. But we do see more digital from the customers that we've been working with for years. There is more appetite for digital at the physical events. Yeah. So it's not looking like it's just a return to how things were pre-pandemic. People are reconsidering what they're doing with the catalogs. A lot of people are finally putting the print catalogs completely to bed and looking at digital solutions for that. It's not only more hygienic, but then it's also it's more, technologies come further. and it can be more productive for everybody, and you can get more feedback and knowledge from the event as well. So I think that's what is exciting to see from an events perspective, that it's not, yes, we need to get back to in-person events, but it's not back to here's your catalog, enjoy the tasting, but there's more there to it.
Yeah.
So many people around the world woke up on January 1st every year, or wake up on January 1st every year, pledging to be sober for the rest of the month, pledging to, just renew or take a break. Or Laurie, have you ever done a sober January?
Never.
Or
Never. Yeah, like it's definitely, I mean, I don't know, maybe it's happening in France now, but it's definitely something now that I live in North America. They call it like dry January. I had friends have done it, and I try to respect their choices. Personally, I've never, ever done it. It just maybe also come to the fact that I think sometimes the drinking of wine is a bit different in different culture. Like it's just, I don't know, like me being French, I'm used to drinking a bit of wine, every day, which is like surprise sometimes some of my Canadian friends, like never done it. And I think it was, like anecdotally, I don't know, I can't use this word in English, but it was really popular. I think the first year of COVID, the second year, and I don't know if people are just like enough of deja vu. I have, in my own circle of friends, like people are just giving up, and I don't know anyone this year in my circle of friends that's doing dry January. They're just like, you know what, scrap this, like reasonable drinking, which I think should be kind of year round minus the holidays, but lower. I think what's happening though, maybe people are testing more because there's more offering on the shelves, at least in North America, is lower alcohol wine. So we see more and more 6.5 to 8.5% alcohol. Keep in mind that often I found as well wine here has a stronger percentage of alcohol than in Europe. Like it's really like very normal here to find wine that like 13.5, 14, 14.5 are normal. Each time when I go back to France, I'm reminded like, 12.5 is, or even 13. But yeah, so like I think really people are like maybe drinking a bit more consciously, and maybe lower alcohol. But I don't know, it feels like 2022, people are just like, this is not the year to stop drinking.
what do you think, Nick? Was dry January so 2021, or is it?
No, I think it's been going on for a while, to be fair. But it does remind me a little bit of an article that was recently published about Rolls-Royce sales, which are higher than they've ever been, as people are reminded of their own mortality and decide to splash out. And I suspect that what we may see during the course of 2022 is people spending a little bit more on average on wine than they might have hitherto spent. So, we'll see, right? We'll see in due course if that prediction comes to anything. But certainly the fine wine market is kind of on fire at the moment.
Interesting, yeah.
And is that due to COVID, or is it due to inflation, or is it due to loosened money? I mean, who knows? But it's gone a little bit crazy.
Interesting.
Jonathan, you grew up in a fairly dry state in the US. What do you think about
dry household? We didn't drink in my house growing up. So, and I would say I'm going through a period of that at the moment as well, since we have our twins since September. There is a bit going on around the house, and it can be a bit more difficult to find time to enjoy a beverage. But going to what Laurie was talking about, low and no, we've kind of gotten into non-alcoholic Weiss beer, and that is something that you can hardly tell the difference between that and an alcoholic version. So those are quite enjoyable. I mean, back when I used to pretend to be a runner and did the marathon in Munich, the second to last water stop, they're actually serving beer. So you can, and they're serving non-alcoholic Weiss beer on the Munich marathon route. So, but I think that the non-alcoholics seem to be coming along. Even the wine shop here in town happens to have now one de-alcoholized white and one de-alcoholized red as well. So we're trying and seeing what's out there, and but I think for the occasions we still go back to the alcohol containing variants.
Mm-hmm.
Well, another interesting article or a survey in the US was asking people, is there a way to drink wine? Are there rules of how you should drink wine? Nick, I'm going to go to you. You seem like the person who, if there was a rule on this panel, you would be supporting it. Is there a way you should do this? Is there a proper way to taste the wine?
Definitely out of a glass, not out of a bottle.
Not out of a can, like Seb might suggest.
But on a slightly more serious note, no, I don't think there should or should be any rules. I mean, having said that, clearly there's a lot of focus on AI within the wine market in helping to provide recommendations and cross-selling opportunities and helping consumers, buyers navigate to the sort of wine that they're more inclined to perhaps like when it turns up. So I think that for that to really work properly, it's got to be at a really, really granular level. And we've talked about some of the API services that are coming onto the market now that pull from a client transactional history. They look at what's in the cart and they provide a background database of how wines break down from a sort of component perspective or elementally. So I think that is interesting, but I think that's more interesting than whether maybe you should, drink something with whatever it is that you're eating on your plate tonight. I'm sure, it's nice to have some guidance, of course, in terms of, what goes well with Asian, what goes well with shellfish or beef or whatever. But I think, those are limiting rules, and I don't think there should be any.
Laurie, what happens when you go to a restaurant and the waiter pours you a bit of wine? Do you give it a swirl? Do you give it a sniff first? Do you just gulp it down? Do you have a kind of little routine or?
I try to pretend that I know what I'm doing. Like often I'm the one at the table that work in the industry. So they always say like, oh, she's the one tasting the wine for the table. It's always pressure. Like you don't want to disappoint the table. You don't want to disappoint the waiters that you don't know, but you don't want to go back with the, yeah, I mean, like it's, so yes, I do the movement, right? Like just kind of like the swirl, the sniff, like a bit of a taste, and 99%. I have returned like once or twice, maybe in my knife bottle. So I was just like, yeah, that's not good. But I would say, with wine, like I'm with Nick, there shouldn't be any rules or anything like that. But I do think there is an opportunity around maybe not going as far as like ritual, but it is one of this liquid that has a little bit of panache if you want it, like in the experience of serving it, but maybe other like pop or like don't have. So where there is no rule, like there is always something enjoyable. I think the best experience, of course, is when you open a bottle of sparkling. Like there's always, you hear that pop, the table cheers, no matter, like it doesn't matter. So there's this that I think maybe can be a bit capitalized a bit more. I know we're moving more to Stelvin capsules, so you don't have the pop of the cork that is also as significant, but I don't know, there's something about the ritual. I got over COVID, like a very nice decanter that also aerate. And I don't know, like just even the simple fact of like putting in the decanter a bottle of wine, it just makes you appreciate people, like look at it, like being decanted, like it's, I don't know, like there is something, I'm not doing it just for the taste and the whole like proper thing, but it's almost like acknowledging like, oh, like this is a nice social experience. I think that maybe more that can be a bit played a bit more without being intimidating whatsoever. More like celebrating. Yeah.
Jonathan, a final word. What do you have any habits? Do you have any things that you do?
No, I would say that I do drink wine on its own. So not always, or I would say half the time I'm having a glass of wine that's on its own. And I think that when you're tearing down the rules or saying, okay, whether you do rules or not, I think the more important thing is that you're making sure the wine's enjoyable. And sometimes the wines that you can pull off the shelf, they're only enjoyable with food, and you don't. And so I would say there's still rules, or it's not really rules, but it's like, I guess it's like if people are not into the details of wine and wine pairing, it's just being aware that, you might have a wine that tastes amazing at dinner. Don't expect the same experience, of course, when you just had it, when you're sitting down to a movie and want to have that wine again. So I think it's when you're going to break the rules, know how you're breaking them, I guess, or the times that you've enjoyed them, just note whatever else you've done so that you can recreate recreate that moment. Again, going back to beer, being in Munich, you go out and you get a Weissbier here, not to go back to the Weissbier, but that is as much an art form of pouring as any wine, because it's not just about getting the beer into the glass. You also have to arrive with the perfect amount of foam at the top. And it's not just pouring, of course, but then bartenders will often take the bottle, pour it, and then they'll sit there and they'll roll the bottle back and forth on the table to get the foam, and then they'll top it off. And so I think, it's the beverages that are not just pop the lid and start drinking it. They are kind of fun to have some sort of ritual around, and some people can really turn that into an art form, which is always cool to see.
Well, welcome to 2022. That was the Wine Tech Insiders podcast. I'd like to thank again our insiders, Laurie from Oushinery, Nick from Wine Owners, and Jonathan from Bottlebooks. We'll see you all in a few weeks.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you much, David. Bye.